The storm came without warning that September night, catching Amelia Voss halfway up the mountain pass. Lightning split the darkness as she stumbled along the rocky trail, her worn boots slipping on wet stones. The rain had started as a drizzle 2 hours ago, but now it fell in sheets, turning the path into a treacherous river of mud. She pulled her thin shawl tighter, though it offered little protection against the cold mountain wind. Her dress, once a respectable blue cotton, now clung to her frame, heavy with rain and mud from where she'd fallen twice already. In her pocket, wrapped in oilcloth, was the letter that had started everything: her refusal to marry Mr. Cornelius Hartwell, a merchant from Denver who was 30 years her senior. Ungrateful girl, her brother Samuel had spat when she'd told him no. Do you think we can afford to keep feeding you forever? The memory of his words stung worse than the rain. Samuel had inherited their father's ranch after his death 3 years ago, along with his cold practicality. Their mother, remarried now to a man who saw Amelia only as currency for his business dealings, had been all too eager to arrange the match with Hartwell. Another crack of thunder shook the mountain, and Amelia pressed herself against the rock face, searching desperately for shelter. Her fingers, numb with cold, found a shallow cave barely deep enough to crouch in. She crawled inside, grateful for even this small mercy. As she huddled in the darkness, she touched the old scar on her upper arm, a long, jagged line from when Samuel had pushed her down the porch steps years ago during one of his rages. She'd learned then that family could wound deeper than any stranger. The storm raged on, and Amelia drew her knees to her chest, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her body. She'd left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the few coins she'd saved from selling eggs at the market. Samuel had made sure of that, watching as she packed, limiting her to what she could carry. You walk out that door. You're no sister of mine, he'd said, and don't think about coming back when your foolish pride leaves you starving. But starving seemed better than being sold to a man who looked at her like she was livestock at auction. Hartwell had visited twice, each time examining her with calculating eyes, discussing her breeding potential with her stepfather as if she weren't standing right there. The wind howled through the cave opening, bringing with it the sharp scent of pine and wet earth. Amelia's teeth chattered uncontrollably. She'd planned to reach Promise Ridge by nightfall, where she'd heard a woman could find honest work at the hotel or one of the respectable boarding houses. But the storm had other plans. Lightning illuminated the cave briefly, showing her how small her shelter truly was. Water dripped steadily from the rocky ceiling, forming puddles around her. She tried to shift position, but there was nowhere dry to move. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. It was impossible to tell in the darkness. The cold had settled deep in her bones, making her limbs feel heavy and strange. She thought of her father, dead these 3 years, and wondered if he would have let this happen. He'd been a hard man, but fair, unlike Samuel, who'd inherited only the hardness. The letter in her pocket seemed to burn against her side. She'd written it in haste, her refusal to Hartwell penned in shaking hands. Sir, while I appreciate your interest, I cannot accept your proposal. I am not suited to the life you envision, and I will not enter into a union without affection or respect. I wish you well in finding a more willing bride. Respectfully, Miss Amelia Voss. Samuel had found it before she could post it. His fury had been swift and terrible. You think you're too good for him? He'd shouted, his face red with rage. A man of means wants to give you a comfortable life, and you spit on it. A comfortable life, she'd shot back, finding courage in her desperation. As his property as breeding stock. That's when he'd grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the old scar, and dragged her to the door. Then go. See how far your high ideals take you in the real world. Now, trembling in her cave, Amelia wondered if he'd been right. Perhaps she should have stayed, should have accepted her fate. At least she'd be warm. At least she'd be... No. She pushed the thought away. Even death on this mountain was preferable to a lifetime of being owned. The storm began to ease as dawn approached, the thunder growing distant. Amelia tried to stand but found her legs wouldn't cooperate. She'd stopped shivering some time ago, which worried her more than the cold itself. Her mother had taught her about the dangers of mountain weather before she'd remarried and forgotten she had a daughter. Through the cave opening, she could see the sky lightening to a pale gray. The rain had become a fine mist, and somewhere below, she heard the sound of horses. "Travelers, perhaps, or Samuel, come to drag her back." She tried to call out, but her voice emerged as barely a whisper. Her strength was nearly gone, spent in the long night's battle against the cold. As the hoofbeats grew louder, Amelia closed her eyes and waited for whatever fate would find her. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a figure dismounting in the pale dawn light, a tall man in a rain-slicked duster, moving toward the cave with careful, deliberate steps. Cain Maddox had been tracking the storm since midnight, moving his horses down from the high pastures before the worst of it hit. He'd seen plenty of mountain storms in his 32 years, enough to know this one carried trouble in its belly. The rain had finally eased to a drizzle as dawn broke over the peaks, painting the wet rocks in shades of silver and gray. He was heading back to his ranch, bone-tired and soaked through, when his horse suddenly shied. The animal's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring at something ahead. Cain trusted his mount's instincts out here. They could mean the difference between life and death. That's when he saw her. A small figure huddled in the shallow cave, so still she might have been part of the rock itself. Cain dismounted slowly, his boots squelching in the mud as he approached. The woman, barely more than a girl, really was curled into herself, her lips tinged blue, her dark hair plastered against pale skin. She was alive, but barely. Cain didn't hesitate. He shrugged out of his heavy duster and wrapped it around her trembling form. She stirred slightly at his touch, eyelids fluttering, but didn't wake. Her skin felt like ice through her soaked dress. "Easy now," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. His voice was rough from disuse. He lived alone and had little cause for conversation. "Let's get you somewhere warm." He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she felt. Whatever had driven her into the mountains in such weather? She'd been traveling hard and eating little. Her face, even unconscious and drawn with exhaustion, held a stubborn set to the jaw that spoke of determination. His horse, Brandy, stood steady as Cain settled the woman in the saddle, then swung up behind her. He pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her to hold both her and the reins. Through his shirt, he could feel her shivers returning, a good sign. The body that had given up shivering was the one closest to death. The ride to his ranch took an hour through the muddy trails. Cain kept Brandy to a careful walk, mindful of his unconscious passenger. She mumbled occasionally, fragments of words he couldn't make out except for one clear phrase, "Won't go back." Whatever she was running from, it had driven her to risk death rather than face it. His ranch sat in a valley pocket on the southern edge of Promise Ridge, far enough from town to avoid unwanted visitors, but close enough for necessary supplies. The log house wasn't much to look at, 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was solid and dry. Smoke already curled from the chimney. He'd banked the fire before leaving. Cain carried the woman inside and laid her on the bed in the main room. For a moment, he stood uncertain. She needed dry clothes, but propriety. Then she shivered violently, and practicality won, moving with clinical efficiency. He removed her soaked outer dress and wrapped her in thick wool blankets, keeping his eyes averted as much as possible. He built up the fire until it roared, filling the room with blessed heat. Only then did he notice the scar on her upper arm, old but ugly, the kind that came from violence rather than accident. His jaw tightened. He'd seen enough in his years to recognize the marks of cruelty. He was heating water for tea when she finally woke. Her eyes opened slowly, brown as autumn leaves, confused and wary. When she saw him standing by the fire, she jerked upright, clutching the blankets. "It's all right," Cain said, keeping his voice low and steady, the way he'd talk to a spooked horse. "You're safe. Found you up in Settler's Pass. Half frozen." She stared at him for a long moment, assessing. He stayed where he was, letting her take his measure. He knew what she saw, a tall man with calloused hands and a face weathered by sun and wind, wearing work clothes that had seen better days. His dark hair needed cutting, and he hadn't shaved in days. Not exactly a reassuring sight for a young woman alone. "Where?" Her voice cracked. "My ranch, about 5 miles south of Promise Ridge." He poured hot water into a cup, added some tea leaves. "You were in a bad way. Storm nearly got you." She accepted the cup with trembling hands, wrapping them around it for warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, then stronger. "Thank you." Kane nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. He moved to the kitchen area, giving her space. "There's some stew from yesterday if you're hungry. Nothing fancy, but it's hot." "Why?" she asked suddenly. He turned back, not understanding. "Why help me?" She watched him over the rim of the cup, those brown eyes holding a wariness that spoke of hard lessons learned. "You don't know me. I could be anyone. A thief, She trailed off. Kane considered the question. He could have given her pretty words about Christian duty or the code of the West. Instead, he told her the simple truth. "Because you're a person," he said, "and you needed help." Something in her face shifted at that, a crack in the defensive wall. She looked away, blinking rapidly. "I'm Amelia," she said after a moment. "Amelia Voss." Kane Maddox. He ladled stew into a bowl, set it on the table with a spoon. "Eat, then rest. Questions can wait." She rose unsteadily, the blanket wrapped around her like armor. At the table, she ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger. Kane busied himself hanging her wet dress by the fire, noting its quality despite the mud and tears. Whatever her story, she hadn't started out poor. "I can't pay you," she said suddenly, pausing with the spoon halfway to her mouth. "I have a few coins, but—" "Didn't ask for payment." "But I can work." The words tumbled out quickly. "I can cook, clean, mend. I'm good with chickens, and I can—" "Miss Voss." He turned to face her. "You don't owe me anything. Rest first. Rest is what you need now." She studied him with those careful eyes. Men always want payment, one kind or another. The flat way she said it made something tighten in his chest. He thought of the scar on her arm, the desperation that had driven her into a killing storm. "Not this man," he said simply. "The bed's yours. I'll take the barn." "I couldn't—" "You could and you will. Door bolts from the inside if that gives you peace." He grabbed his still damp coat. "I need to check on the horses anyway. There's more tea on the stove, and wood by the fire. Sleep. Everything else can sort itself tomorrow." He was at the door when her voice stopped him. "Mr. Maddox, why were you out in that storm?" He paused, hand on the latch. "Moving horses to lower ground. Storm like that can kill stock as easy as people. You risked yourself for horses." He looked back at her, huddled at his table in his blankets, looking lost and young and fierce all at once. "They depend on me," he said. "Man doesn't abandon what depends on him." Something passed across her face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said again, and this time the words carried weight. Kane touched his hat brim and stepped out into the gray morning. As he walked to the barn, he heard the bolt slide home behind him. Good. She was careful. In his experience, careful people were usually running from something that had taught them caution the hard way. Whatever had sent Amelia Voss into that storm, it was her business. He'd offered shelter. Nothing more. Come tomorrow or the next day, she'd move on to wherever she'd been headed, and his life would return to its quiet routine. But as he settled into the hay in the barn, listening to the last of the rain pattering on the roof, Kane found himself thinking about brown eyes that expected cruelty and found kindness suspicious. He'd built his solitary life carefully these past years, keeping the world at arm's length. Something told him Amelia Voss might complicate that arrangement. He pulled his hat over his eyes and tried to sleep, while in the house, a young woman sat by the fire, wrapped in borrowed blankets, wondering if she'd finally found a place where the past couldn't reach her. The morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the still air. Amelia woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Where was she? Then memory returned the storm, the cave, the quiet man who'd carried her to safety. Kane's house was simple but clean. She noticed now in daylight. The log walls were chinked tight against the weather. The plank floor swept bare. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold now but with fresh wood stacked beside it. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, a table with 2 chairs, a shelf holding a few dishes and cups, the bed she'd slept in with its thick wool blankets. But it was the small details that told her more about Kane Maddox. An old guitar hung on the wall, its wood polished smooth by years of handling. Books lined a shelf by the window, not many, but well read from the look of their spines. A faded photograph in a simple frame showed a younger Kane standing beside an older couple, probably his parents. And there was a dog bed in the corner, though no dog to be seen. Amelia rose carefully, still wearing her shift beneath the blankets he'd wrapped around her. Her dress hung by the fireplace, dry now but stained and torn from her flight. She dressed quickly, then unbolted the door and stepped onto the porch. The ranch spread before her in the morning light, not large, but well kept. A barn and corral held a handful of horses, their coats gleaming with health. Chickens scratched in a pen near what looked like a smokehouse. Mountains rose on all sides, creating a natural bowl that sheltered the valley. An old dog limped around the corner of the house, stopping short when it saw her. Its tail wagged uncertainly. "Hello, old fellow," Amelia said softly, extending her hand. The dog, some mix of shepherd and something else, approached slowly and sniffed her fingers before allowing her to scratch behind his ears. "That's Dusty," Kane's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him carrying a bucket of water from the well, his shirt already damp with the day's work. He's going on 15 years now, more gray than brown these days. "He's sweet," Amelia said, continuing to pet the dog, who leaned against her skirts with a contented sigh. Kane set the bucket on the porch. "Coffee's on the stove if you want some. There's bread from yesterday and some preserves." "Thank you." She hesitated. "Mr. Maddox, I should—" "Kane," he interrupted. "Just Kane is fine." "Kane?" The name felt strange on her tongue. "I should be moving on. You've been more than kind, but I don't want to impose." He studied her for a moment, those gray eyes unreadable. "Where were you headed?" "Promise Ridge. I heard there might be work there, at the hotel, or perhaps one of the boarding houses. You have people expecting you." She shook her head, looking away. No one." Kane was quiet for a moment, then gestured toward the barn. "Fence got damaged in the storm. Could use an extra pair of hands fixing it, if you're inclined to work for your breakfast." It wasn't charity, she realized. He was offering her a way to keep her dignity while giving her time to figure out her next move. "I'd be glad to help." They worked through the morning in companionable silence. Kane showed her how to hold the rails while he hammered, how to test if a post was solid or needed replacing. He didn't treat her like she was fragile, didn't hover or repeatedly ask if she needed rest. He simply worked, and she worked alongside him. Dusty supervised from a sunny spot, occasionally wandering over to check their progress. "You're not from around here," Amelia ventured after a while. "Texas, originally," Kane replied, testing another post. "Came up here about 5 years ago. Why Montana? He was quiet long enough she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, sometimes a man needs distance from his past. She understood that. Oh, how she understood that. They broke at midday, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold water from the well. Amelia noticed how Cain moved around her, never crowding, always leaving her a clear path to the door. It was the movement of a man who understood fear, who knew what it was like to feel trapped. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they returned to work. He nodded. "Why do you live out here alone?" Cain aligned another rail before answering. "Suits me. Town's close enough for supplies, far enough for peace." He glanced at her. "Why were you in that storm?" "Fair was fair. My brother decided I should marry. I disagreed." "Ah," just that one sound, but it held understanding. "The man was—" She searched for words. "He saw me as an investment. Good teeth, good hips, good for—" She trailed off, heat rising in her cheeks. "You don't need to explain," Cain said quietly. "Man who sees a woman that way isn't worth the air he breathes." The vehemence in his tone surprised her. She looked at him, but he was focused on the fence, jaw tight. They worked until late afternoon, the fence slowly taking shape. As the sun began to sink toward the mountains, Cain straightened and surveyed their progress. "Good work," he said simply. "You've got steady hands." It was a small compliment, but Amelia felt a flutter of pride. When was the last time someone had praised her for anything besides her appearance? That evening, she insisted on cooking supper. Cain had been living on bacon and beans, she discovered, with the occasional addition of whatever game he shot. She found flour, lard, and a few withered potatoes in his pantry and set about making a proper meal. Cain sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle, dusty at his feet. She felt his eyes on her as she worked, but didn't find it uncomfortable. It wasn't the hungry gaze she was used to from men. It was curious, maybe thoughtful. "You play?" she asked, nodding toward the guitar. "Some, not well." "My father played fiddle," she offered. "Before he died. Used to play in the evenings after supper." "Good memories." "The best," she smiled sadly. "Everything changed after he was gone." Cain set aside the rifle. Change has a way of finding us whether we want it or not. After supper, as she washed the dishes and he dried, Amelia found herself reluctant to end the day. Tomorrow she would need to leave, find her way to town, and whatever uncertain future waited there. But tonight— "Would you play something?" she asked impulsively. "The guitar." Cain looked surprised, then almost shy. "Been a while." "I'd like to hear it, if you don't mind." He took down the guitar, running his fingers over the strings, adjusting the tuning. Then he began to play nothing fancy, just a simple melody that spoke of wide skies and lonely places. His fingers were sure despite his claims of poor skill, and the music filled the small house with warmth. Amelia found herself crying, though she couldn't say why. The tears came quietly, sliding down her cheeks as she listened. It wasn't sadness exactly, but a kind of recognition, like hearing her own loneliness given voice. Cain played through to the end, then set the guitar aside. He didn't comment on her tears, just handed her a clean handkerchief from his pocket. "Thank you," she whispered. "Been a long few days for you," he said gently. "Rest helps. Time helps." "Does it?" She looked at him through wet lashes. "You said you needed distance from your past. Did it help?" He considered this. Some can't outrun everything, but sometimes distance lets you see clearer, figure out what's worth keeping and what needs letting go. "What did you let go?" "Family expectations, a life that was planned for me instead of chosen." His smile was rueful. "Sound familiar?" "And what did you keep?" He gestured around the simple room. "This, work that matters, peace." He paused. "Music, sometimes, when the mood strikes." Amelia folded the handkerchief carefully. I should go to town tomorrow. If that's what you want. It's what I should do. You've been kind, but kindness isn't a debt, Kane said firmly. You needed help. I gave it. Nothing owed. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She'd learned early that everything came with a price, that kindness was often the most expensive currency of all. Yet here was this quiet man in his simple house, offering help without conditions, playing guitar for a stranger's tears. I don't understand you, she admitted. Kane's smile was small but real. Nothing complicated to understand, just a man who raises horses and fixes fences. But she sensed there was more depths beneath that calm surface. Old pain carefully set aside. They were alike in that way, both running from lives that didn't fit. That night, she lay in the bed while he took the barn again, listening to the wind in the pines and Dusty's occasional bark at some night creature. Tomorrow she would leave. It was the sensible thing, the safe thing. So why did the thought fill her with such reluctance? The first winter wind came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with a bite that promised snow before long. Amelia had been at Kane's ranch for a week now, each morning telling herself she would leave for town, each evening finding another reason to stay. The chicken coop needed repairs. The preserved vegetables needed organizing. Small tasks that somehow stretched to fill entire days. Kane never questioned her lingering presence. He simply included her in the rhythm of ranch life morning chores. Afternoon repairs, evening meals shared in comfortable quiet. They'd developed an unspoken routine she cooked while he tended the horses. They worked side by side on whatever needed fixing, then spent evenings by the fire, sometimes talking, often just sharing the silence. It was during one of those evening silences that Amelia finally spoke about what had driven her from home. My father died in debt, she said, staring into the flames. Not much, but enough. Samuel, my brother, he paid it off, took over the ranch, said I owed him for that everything I did reflected on his generosity. Kane remained quiet, whittling a piece of wood into what might become a spoon. When Mother remarried, her new husband saw an opportunity. Mr. Hartwell in Denver needed a young wife, was willing to pay well for the right girl. They discussed terms like I was prize cattle. Her voice turned bitter. Samuel said I was being selfish, that I should be grateful someone respectable wanted me despite our reduced circumstances. Man who buys a wife isn't respectable, Kane said quietly, no matter how much money he has. Amelia pulled her shawl tighter. When I refused, Samuel said I was no longer welcome, that I could marry Hartwell or make my own way. She laughed, short and sharp. He probably expected me to cave immediately. Spoiled little sister, never worked a real day in her life. Seems to me you work plenty hard, Kane observed, nodding toward the kitchen where fresh bread cooled on the table, the mended clothes hanging by the door, the gleaming windows she'd cleaned that afternoon. This is different, Amelia said. This is chosen. They sat quietly for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, she asked. What about you? You mentioned family expectations. Kane set down his whittling. Father was a judge in Texas, wanted me to study law, follow in his footsteps, had my whole life mapped out the right schools, the right connections, the right marriage to the right girl from the right family. What happened? War happened. His voice went distant. I was barely 18 when it started. Joined up. Thought I was being noble. 4 years later, I came home different. Couldn't sit in a courtroom pretending words on paper mattered more than what I'd seen. He picked up the wood again, hands needing something to do. Father said I was throwing away everything he'd worked for. Maybe I was, but I couldn't be what he wanted anymore. So you came here. Drifted for a while first. Worked cattle drives, railroad camps, whatever paid, finally saved enough for this place. He gestured around the simple room. It's not much, but it's mine. Built with my own hands, bought with my own sweat. Amelia understood. The freedom to choose your own path. Even if it was harder, that was worth more than comfort bought with submission. The next morning brought the work of preparing for winter. They spent the day patching holes in the barn walls, Kane showing her how to mix mud and straw for chinking. It was messy work, but satisfying to see the gaps sealed against the coming cold. "Storm coming," Kane said, studying the northern sky where clouds built like dark mountains. Could be just wind, could be early snow. They worked faster, racing the weather. By afternoon, the wind had picked up, sending leaves swirling across the yard. Dusty whined uneasily, pressing close to Amelia's skirts. "Help me get the horses in," Kane called, heading for the corral. "This feels like a bad one." The horses were nervous, dancing and tossing their heads as the wind grew stronger. Amelia had learned their names over the past week. Brandy, Kane's steady mount; Belle, a sweet-tempered mare; Jasper, a young gelding still learning manners. They worked together to herd them into the barn, Kane's calm voice settling the spooked animals. Thunder rumbled overhead as they latched the barn door. The first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly becoming a deluge. "Run for the house!" Kane shouted over the wind. They dashed across the yard, but the rain caught them halfway. By the time they reached the porch, both were soaked. Lightning flashed, illuminating the valley in stark white light. Inside, Amelia stood dripping by the door, suddenly aware of how her wet dress clung to her. Kane turned away quickly, busying himself with building up the fire. There's a dry shirt and pants in the chest," he said, not looking at her. "They'll be too big, but they're warm." She changed behind the blanket he'd strung up as a privacy screen, rolling up the sleeves and legs of his clothes. They smelled like him, soap and leather and something uniquely Kane. When she emerged, he'd changed too, and had water heating for coffee. The storm intensified, rain hammering the roof like angry fists. Lightning struck close enough to make the windows rattle. "It's like that night," Amelia said softly, "when you found me." "You're safe now," Kane said. He stood by the window, watching the storm. "This house has weathered worse." Another lightning strike, brilliant and terrifying. Amelia found herself moving closer to him, drawn by some instinct she didn't fully understand. He turned as she approached, and suddenly they were standing very close in the dim room. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Not of the storm," she said, and it was true. What frightened her was this feeling building in her chest, this pull toward a man she'd known only days. She'd fled one trap only to feel herself falling into something else entirely. Kane's hand rose as if to touch her face, then dropped. "Amelia!" "I should go to town," she said quickly. "When the storm passes, I've imposed too long." "You haven't imposed," his voice was rough. "But if you need to go." "I don't need to, that's the problem." She laughed shakily. "I told myself I'd never depend on anyone again, never let myself be vulnerable. And here I am, wearing your clothes, standing in your house, not wanting to leave." "Staying isn't depending," Kane said carefully. "Not if it's your choice." "Is it, or am I just trading one cage for another?" He stepped back as if she'd slapped him. "I've never asked anything from you, never would." "I know." And that was the terrifying part. His kindness without conditions, his quiet strength, the way he looked at her like she was a person instead of a prize. It was everything she'd never known to want. "That's what scares me. With Samuel, with Hartwell, I knew the price. I could see the cage. With you, there is no cage," Kane said firmly. "Door's not locked. Never will be. You want to leave tomorrow? I'll take you to town myself. You want to stay? There's work enough for two." He met her eyes steadily. "Your choice, Amelia. Always your choice." Thunder crashed overhead, making them both jump. Then, impulsively, Amelia reached for his hand. It was calloused and warm, and after a moment's hesitation, his fingers closed gently around hers. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "How to choose freely, how to trust. Takes practice." Kane said, "I'm still learning too." They stood there, hands linked, while the storm raged outside. It wasn't a promise or a declaration. It was simpler than that, two people choosing to not be alone. At least for this moment. When the lightning flashed again, Amelia didn't flinch. She squeezed Kane's hand and felt him squeeze back. An anchor in the storm. "Teach me," she said, "about the ranch, the horses, all of it. You want to learn. I want to be useful, really useful, not just decorative." She lifted her chin. "I may not know much about ranching, but I can learn. I'm stronger than I look." Kane smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. "I believe you are." The storm continued through the night, but inside the small house, something had shifted. Not a cage closing, but a door opening to possibility, to choice, to a future neither had imagined. When morning came, Amelia was still there, and for the first time since her father died, she woke without fear of what the day would bring. The storm struck without warning 3 weeks later, catching them in the high pasture while checking on a pregnant mare. They'd ridden up together on Brandy and Belle, planning a quick trip before the weather turned. But the mountains had their own plans. The sky darkened from blue to black in minutes. Wind howled down from the peaks, bending the pines nearly horizontal. The first crack of thunder sent Belle dancing sideways, eyes rolling white with fear. "We need shelter," Kane shouted over the growing gale. He pointed toward an old equipment shed at the pasture's edge. "There!" They fought their way across the field, leading the terrified horses. Rain began in sheets, cold and stinging. Lightning split the sky. So close Amelia could smell the sharp scent of it. The shed barely more than 4 walls, and a roof offered minimal protection. But it was better than the open field. Inside, they tied the horses to the support posts. The animals huddled together, trembling. Amelia was shaking too, though not entirely from cold. The storm's violence reminded her too much of that night in the mountains, of how close she'd come to dying alone. Kane pulled her away from the doorway as wind drove rain horizontally through the entrance. They pressed against the back wall, the small space barely big enough for them and the horses. "It'll pass," Kane said, though he looked concerned. This storm had come from nowhere, fierce and sudden. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face in stark relief. Water dripped from his hat brim, and his shirt was plastered to his chest. He'd positioned himself between her and the door. She realized an unconscious gesture of protection. The thunder that followed shook the shed's walls. Amelia pressed closer to Kane without thinking, her hands gripping his arm. He went very still. "I'm sorry." She started to pull away, but his hand covered hers, holding it in place. "Don't be," he said quietly. They stood like that, her hands on his arm, his hand over hers, while the storm raged. The shed groaned under the wind's assault. Something crashed outside a tree branch, maybe, or part of a fence. "Amelia," his voice was low, barely audible over the storm. "There's something I need to say." She looked up at him, seeing the struggle in his face. These past weeks had been a careful dance between them, working together, sharing meals, talking by the fire, but always maintaining a careful distance. She'd caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't read, and she knew he'd noticed her doing the same. "You don't have to," she started. "Yes, I do." He turned to face her fully, rain wet and serious. "You said you were afraid of trading one cage for another. I need you to understand I would never. I care too much about you to ever—" Another lightning strike, so bright it left after images. In that moment of brilliant illumination, Amelia saw everything in his face, the loneliness he carried, the careful restraint he maintained, the genuine care he tried so hard to hide. Kane, she whispered. I know you're not ready, he continued, words coming faster now. Maybe you'll never be, that's all right. But I couldn't let you think that my feelings would ever be another trap. They're mine to carry, not yours to. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was impulsive, born of storm and confession and weeks of unspoken tension. His lips were cool from rain, but they warmed quickly. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his arms came around her, careful still, as if she might break or flee. The kiss was gentle, questioning. Nothing like what she'd feared from men before. When thunder crashed again, she jerked back, suddenly aware of what she'd done. You'll regret this kiss, she said, her voice shaking. The words came from some deep place of fear, of certainty that anything good would be taken away. When you know me better, when you realize I'm broken, difficult, that I'll never be a proper wife who... Kane's hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away rainwater or tears she couldn't tell which. His eyes held hers, steady and sure despite the chaos around them. Let me decide what I'll regret, he said. Then he pulled her closer and kissed her again. This kiss was different, deeper, more certain. It spoke of loneliness recognized and answered, of careful walls crumbling, of two people choosing each other despite their fears. Amelia's hands fisted in his wet shirt, anchoring herself as the world spun. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, the storm's fury seemed distant compared to the thundering of her heart. I'm not him, Kane said against her forehead. Not your brother, not that buyer in Denver. I'm just a man who builds fences and raises horses and plays guitar badly, but I'm yours if you want me. I don't know how to be anyone's, Amelia admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know how to trust this. Then we'll learn together. He pulled back to look at her. No rush, no demands. Just this, whatever you're willing to give. She searched his face, looking for the trap, the hidden expectation. But there was only Kane, steady as the mountains, offering her something she'd never thought to find: choice without condition, affection without price. The wind still howled, but its voice seemed less threatening now. Belle nickered nervously, and Kane stepped away to soothe the mare, giving Amelia space to breathe, to think. She watched him gentle the frightened animal, his hands sure and calm, and felt something ease in her chest. The storm's moving past, he said after a while, studying the sky through the doorway. We should head back before another one comes. The ride home was quiet, both lost in thought. The landscape looked different after the storm branches down, new streams running where none had been before. Change written across the familiar valley. Back at the ranch, they worked in tandem to dry and settle the horses. Their usual comfortable rhythm was shot through with new awareness, hands brushing as they reached for the same brush, eyes meeting and holding a beat too long. The space between them charged like the air before lightning. That evening, as Amelia prepared dinner, she felt Kane watching her from his chair by the fire. When she turned, he didn't look away. Are you sorry? She asked. About earlier? No. Simple and direct. Are you? She considered lying, retreating to safety. Instead, I'm scared. Of me. Of wanting this. Of believing it's real. She set down the spoon she'd been holding. Every good thing in my life has come with a price I couldn't pay. Kane rose and crossed to her, movements deliberate and unhurried. He stopped just out of reach, letting her choose the distance. What's the price here? He asked. I don't know. That's what terrifies me. What if there isn't one? What if it's just two people choosing to face the storms together instead of alone? She thought of that shed, of how his presence had transformed her fear into something manageable, of these weeks in his house, learning she could be useful, valued for more than her appearance or breeding potential, of the quiet evenings when silence felt like conversation and loneliness seemed like a distant memory. I've never kissed anyone because I wanted to before, she admitted It was always stolen or demanded or expected. Understanding darkened his eyes. "Amelia, but I wanted to kiss you." The words came out in a rush. "In the storm, when you were trying so hard to be noble, to give me room to run, I wanted to choose something for once. And now?" She stepped into the space between them, her hand finding his. "Now I want to choose it again." This time when they kissed, it was without the storm's urgency, soft and searching. A question asked and answered. When they parted, Cain rested his forehead against hers. "We'll take this slow," he promised. "Whatever pace you need." "What if I don't know what I need?" "Then we'll figure it out as we go." She laughed shakily. "You make it sound simple." "Not simple," he corrected, "but possible." Later, as they sat by the fire closer than before, but not quite touching, Amelia found herself believing him. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp with promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to face. But tonight, she'd chosen to kiss a man in a storm, and he'd chosen to pull her closer despite her warnings. It wasn't a fairy tale or a grand romance. It was quieter than that, more careful. It was two damaged people deciding to heal together, one small choice at a time. And for now, that was enough. The kiss changed everything and nothing. They still worked side by side, shared meals, spent evenings by the fire. But now there were stolen moments, a hand brushing a shoulder while passing, a kiss on the forehead before bed, fingers intertwined while watching sunset paint the mountains gold. Each small intimacy felt like a victory over the past that had taught Amelia touch meant taking. But as the days grew shorter and winter crept closer, she found herself pulling back. The easier things became, the more she feared their loss. At night, she lay in the bed Cain still insisted on taking the barn and wondered when the price would come due. Happiness, she'd learned, was just debt that hadn't been collected yet. Cain noticed her retreat. Of course, he noticed everything with those quiet gray eyes. But he didn't push, didn't demand explanations. He simply maintained his steady presence, like the mountains themselves unchanging, patient, there when she was ready. It was the bread that finally broke her. She woke one morning to find fresh bread on the table, still warm from the oven. Beside it sat a pot of preserves and hot coffee. Cain was already out with the horses, but evidence of his early rising was everywhere: the swept floor, the banked fire, the water bucket filled from the well. Such a small thing, but it undid her completely. Amelia sank into a chair, staring at the bread through blurred vision. When had someone last taken care of her without expecting payment? When had kindness come without strings attached? She was still sitting there when Cain returned, stopping short in the doorway when he saw her tears. "What's wrong?" He crossed to her quickly but didn't touch, respecting the distance she'd rebuilt between them. "The bread," she managed. He looked confused. "Is something wrong with it?" "No." She laughed through her tears, knowing she must sound mad. "It's perfect. That's the problem." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He pulled out the other chair, sitting across from her. "Talk to me." "I keep waiting," she admitted, "for you to show your real face, to tell me what you really want, to present the bill for all this kindness." "Amelia." "I know you won't. I know you're not like them. But I can't stop waiting for it." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "Every morning I wake up happy. And then I remember that happiness is dangerous, that it makes you vulnerable." Cain was quiet for a moment. Then, "My mother used to make bread every Tuesday and Friday. The whole house would smell like it. When I came home from the war, she'd change the schedule to whenever I was having a bad day. Never said anything about it, just bread would appear." Amelia looked at him through her tears. "She died my second year here," he continued. "Haven't made bread since. Didn't even realize I was doing it until I was pulling it from the oven this morning." He met her eyes. "Maybe I needed to take care of someone again. maybe you needed to let someone take care of you. Either way, it's just bread. Amelia, not a trap, not a debt, just bread. I'm broken, she whispered. I don't know how to accept good things anymore. Then we'll practice. He reached across the table, palm up, offering but not taking. After a moment, she placed her hand in his. Start small. Accept the bread. Tomorrow we'll work on accepting the coffee too. Despite everything, she laughed. You make it sound easy. Not easy, necessary. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. You can't live your whole life waiting for the storm. Says the man who sleeps in the barn. Fair point. He smiled ruefully. Maybe we're both broken in different ways. That afternoon, they worked on winterizing the chicken coop. Amelia found herself watching Cain more than working, noting the careful way he moved around her, the patience in his hands, the way he hummed tunelessly while he worked. When had this quiet man become her safe harbor? You're staring, he said without looking up from the board he was measuring. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. Cain? She waited until he met her eyes. I'm sorry I pulled away. You don't need to apologize for protecting yourself. I'm not protecting myself. I'm protecting you. At his questioning look, she explained, from me, from my damage, from the way I'll inevitably disappoint you. Cain set down his tools and turned to face her fully. You think you're the only one with damage? You think I sleep in the barn just to be noble? He laughed, but it held no humor. First year after the war, I couldn't sleep indoors. Walls felt like they were closing in. Took 2 years before I could stay in a bedroom all night without waking up swinging. Cain. We've all got our ghosts. Amelia, difference is whether we face them alone or together. She thought about that as they finished their work, as they prepared dinner together, as they sat by the fire afterward. Cain had taken out his guitar, fingers finding melodies while she mended one of his shirts. Domestic, peaceful, terrifying in its normalcy. I want to try, she said suddenly. He looked up from the guitar. Try what? Being together, really together, not just circling each other like wounded animals. What does that mean to you? She set aside the mending, choosing her words carefully. It means not pulling away when I get scared. It means trusting that the bread is just bread. It means... She took a breath. It means asking you to sleep inside, in your own house, in your own bed. Cain went very still. Amelia, you don't have to... I know. She stood, smoothing her skirts with nervous hands. That's why I can ask. Because you'd sleep in that barn forever if you thought it made me feel safer. But I don't want you out there anymore. I want... She faltered, then found her courage. I want to wake up and know you're near. Want to make you coffee before you make me bread. Want to stop living like we're both about to run. He set the guitar aside slowly, standing to face her. Are you sure? Instead of answering, she stepped into his space and kissed him. Not like the storm kiss, wild and desperate. This was deliberate, chosen, a crossing of bridges that couldn't be uncrossed. When they parted, she saw her own fear reflected in his eyes, but beneath it, something else, hope. We'll probably make mistakes, he said. Definitely. And there'll be bad days, days when the ghosts are louder than the living. I know. He cupped her face gently. But we'll face them together. Together, she agreed. That night, Cain slept inside. Not in the bed, they weren't ready for that, but on a bedroll by the fire. Dusty curled beside him. Amelia lay in the dark, listening to his breathing, to the familiar sounds of the house settling around them both. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better two people choosing to lower their walls, one brick at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Her past would resurface, she knew that with cold certainty. His ghosts would demand their due. But tonight, she'd asked for what she wanted and received it freely. Tonight, they were learning to accept bread without looking for the price. It was a start. The sound of horses arriving at dawn shattered their peaceful routine. Amelia was feeding the chickens when she heard them multiple riders coming fast down the valley trail. Her blood turned cold. She knew, even before seeing them, who it would be. Cain emerged from the barn, pitchfork in hand, his body tensing as he counted the riders. 3 men, the one in front, sitting tall on an expensive bay gelding, was Samuel Voss. "Get inside," Cain said quietly to Amelia. "No." She straightened, grain still clutched in her apron. "I won't hide." Samuel dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd grown up in the saddle. He looked older than she remembered. Harder, beside him, a heavy-set man with gold teeth remained mounted Cornelius Hartwell. The third man, younger and wearing a tied-down gun, was a stranger. "Amelia!" Samuel's voice carried across the yard like a whip crack. "Time to stop this foolishness." "Samuel?" She was proud her voice didn't shake. "You're not welcome here." His eyes narrowed, flicking between her and Cain. "Living in sin with a stranger, you've shamed our family name worse than I thought possible." "The only shame," Cain said evenly, "is a man who'd sell his sister." Samuel's hand moved toward his gun, but Cain didn't flinch. The pitchfork in his hands might have been a walking stick for all the concern he showed. "You must be the rancher who's been harboring my wayward sister," Samuel said. "I'm here to collect what's mine." "I'm not yours." Amelia stepped forward. "I'm not anyone's property." Hartwell finally spoke, his voice oily with false concern. "My dear, you're clearly confused. The stress of rough living has affected your judgment. Come with us now, and all will be forgiven." "Forgiven?" Amelia laughed, sharp and bitter. "For what? For refusing to be sold, for choosing my own path. For sullying yourself with this nobody." Samuel spat. "Look at you dressed like a servant, doing menial labor. Is this what you wanted to be, some saddle tramp's—" "Careful." Cain's voice cut through like a blade. "Next words out of your mouth better be respectful." The hired gun shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his weapon. Cain tracked the movement but didn't react. "Mr. Maddox, is it?" Hartwell dismounted heavily, approaching with the confidence of a man used to buying his way through life. "Let's discuss this as civilized men. The girl is contracted to me. Her brother signed the papers. I've paid a considerable deposit. Surely we can reach an understanding." "No." Cain's response was flat. "There's no understanding to reach. Miss Voss is here of her own free will. She stays or goes as she chooses." "She's not of age," Samuel argued. "She needs a guardian's permission to—" "I'm 22, Amelia interrupted. "Well past the age of consent. You lied to him, didn't you? Told him I was younger." Samuel's face darkened. "You were promised to Mr. Hartwell. A Voss keeps their word. Your word, not mine." She moved closer to Cain, not quite touching but drawing strength from his presence. "I choose to stay here, with the man who sees me as a person, not merchandise." "You're making a mistake," Hartwell said, his genial mask slipping. "I'm offering you comfort, status, security. What can this—" He gestured dismissively at Cain. "This nobody offer you a 2-room shack and a life of drudgery?" "Respect," Amelia said simply. "Choice, kindness without price." "Every kindness has a price." Samuel sneered. "You think he's different. He's just playing a longer game." Cain spoke then, his voice carrying the quiet authority of truth. "The lady has made her position clear. You need to leave. Now." The hired gun finally spoke. "Maybe the lady needs persuading." The click of a rifle being cocked came from behind them. They all turned to see old Dusty standing on the porch, holding Cain's Winchester with steady hands. "No, not Dusty." Amelia blinked. When had Cain circled around to— "Like I said," Cain continued calmly. The rifle trained on the gunman. "Time to leave." "This isn't over," Samuel promised. "I'll go to the law. Have you arrested for kidnapping, corrupting a young woman? Try it, Kane suggested. I've got friends in Promise Ridge. Judge Carter knows me well. We can discuss how you tried to sell your sister against her will, forged her age on legal documents. Might be interesting. Hartwell's face had gone purple. You haven't heard the last of this. That girl cost me— That woman, Kane corrected, owes you nothing. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Samuel grabbed his horse's reins. You're dead to me, he told Amelia. Both our parents would be ashamed. Father would have protected me, Amelia said quietly. The way Kane is now, you're the one who should be ashamed. Samuel. He mounted without another word. Hartwell struggled into his saddle, shooting venomous looks at them both. The hired gun backed his horse away slowly, hands visible. This ain't over, he promised Kane. It is if you're smart, Kane replied. They watched the three men ride away, dust rising in their wake. Only when they disappeared over the ridge did Kane lower the rifle. Amelia's knees suddenly felt weak. Hey now! Kane set the rifle aside and steadied her. You did good, real good. They'll be back, she said, with more men, or the law, or— Maybe not. Men like Hartwell prefer easy prey. You showed him you've got teeth. He smiled grimly. Besides, I wasn't bluffing about Judge Carter. He owes me a few favors. From your mysterious past. From breaking his prize stallion 2 summers ago. Nothing mysterious about it. His expression softened. You all right? She considered the question. Her brother had just disowned her. She'd been threatened, insulted, nearly dragged away by force, but— I'm free, she said wonderingly. Really free. I stood up to them. You did. I chose you, in front of them, publicly. The weight of that settled on her. There's no going back now. Regrets? She looked up at him, this quiet man who'd stood between her and danger without hesitation, who'd offered her shelter without conditions, who'd given her space to choose her own path. No, she said firmly. No regrets. He kissed her then, there in the yard with the dust still settling. It was a claiming kiss, a promise kiss, a kiss that said some things were worth fighting for. When they parted, she asked, Did you mean it about Judge Carter? Every word, but I don't think we'll need him. Your brother's a coward at heart. He likes his violence indirect, through contracts and arrangements. Direct confrontation. Kane shook his head. Not his style. They went inside together, Dusty padding after them. Amelia's hands shook as she made coffee, reaction setting in. Kane sat at the table, cleaning the rifle with methodical movements. Thank you, she said, for standing with me. Always will, he said simply. That's what partners do. Partners, the word warm in her chest. Is that what we are? He looked up from the rifle. If you want to be, no papers or contracts, just choosing each other. Every day. Even after that, even knowing they might come back. Especially after that. He set the rifle aside. You stood in that yard and claimed your life. Amelia claimed me too. If I heard right, man would be a fool not to stand with a woman that brave. She abandoned the coffee and went to him, sliding onto his lap in a way that would have scandalized her former self. His arms came around her automatically. I meant what I said, she told him. About choosing you, about staying. I know. He pressed his forehead to hers. Question is, what do you want to do now we could go to town? Make it official if you want. Or not, your choice. You'd marry me even with all this trouble. Especially with all this trouble. His smile was crooked. Though I should warn you, I snore something terrible, and my cooking's worse than my guitar playing. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I already knew about the snoring. The walls aren't that thick. Woman's got ears like a bat, he told Dusty solemnly. The dog wagged his tail in agreement. What I want, Amelia said slowly, is to stay here, build something real with you. Let Samuel and Hartwell fade into the past where they belong. She touched his face. Is that enough? No ceremony, no papers. More than enough. He caught her hand, kissed her palm. Though, if you change your mind, town's not going anywhere. They spent the rest of the day together, working side by side with new awareness. The threat had passed for now, but it had crystallized something between them. They'd been tested and held true. That night, as they sat by the fire, Amelia felt the last of her walls crumble. She'd spent so long running from cages that she'd almost missed the open door Cain offered partnership without possession, love without ownership. Come to bed, she said quietly, standing and offering her hand. Cain looked up at her, understanding in his eyes. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He took her hand, and they walked together into whatever came next, leaving the ghosts and threats outside in the cold. They'd chosen each other in front of enemies. Now they'd choose each other in the quiet darkness, where promises were made not with words, but with trust freely given. The price of happiness, Amelia realized, wasn't what she'd feared. It was simply courage, the courage to reach for what you wanted and hold on tight when storms came calling. And with Cain's hand warm in hers, she found she had courage to spare. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Amelia stood on the porch, watching the light fade while Cain tended the horses. 3 days had passed since Samuel's visit, 3 days of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But no one had come. The valley remained peaceful, holding its breath. Inside, dinner simmered on the stove, venison stew with vegetables from their garden. Their garden. The thought still made her chest tight with something between joy and disbelief. When had Cain's place become theirs? When had she stopped thinking about leaving? You're thinking too loud, Cain said, coming up behind her. His arm slipped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Just wondering when I'll stop waiting for disaster. She admitted, takes time. He rested his chin on top of her head. Trust is like breaking a horse. Can't rush it, can't force it. Just gotta be patient and consistent. Did you just compare me to a horse? A particularly stubborn mare, maybe. She elbowed him gently, but she was smiling. These moments of easy affection still felt new, precious. After that night when she'd invited him to bed to sleep, just sleep. But together something had shifted between them. The careful distance was gone, replaced by casual touches, morning kisses. The comfort of knowing someone was there. They were setting the table for dinner when Dusty began barking. Not his usual alert bark, but something more urgent. Cain's hand went to the rifle by the door. Stay inside, he said, but Amelia was already following him onto the porch. A lone rider approached in the fading light. Not Samuel, this horse moved wrong, favoring its left front leg. As it drew closer, Amelia gasped. The rider was a woman, slumped forward in the saddle, barely holding on. Cain was down the steps in seconds, catching her as she half fell from the horse, in the lamplight from the house. Amelia could see she was young, maybe 17, with tangled red hair and clothes torn from hard riding. Please, the girl whispered. Please help, they're coming. Who's coming? Cain asked, already lifting her. My father, his men. Her green eyes were wild with fear. I won't go back. I won't marry him. Please. Amelia's blood ran cold. The girl's story was hauntingly familiar. Bring her inside, she said, holding the door open. They settled the girl. She said her name was Margaret O'Brien, in a chair by the fire. She was exhausted, but not injured, just scared and desperate, while Cain saw to her horse. Amelia heated water for tea and tried to get the story. Father promised me to Mr. Josiah Blackwood, Margaret said, clutching the cup with shaking hands. He's 53, and his last 2 wives died young. People say, they say he killed them. Where's your mother? Amelia asked gently. Dead these 5 years. Father drinks, gambles, owes Blackwood money. Margaret's voice broke. I'm the payment. Amelia's hands clenched in her skirts. How many girls faced this same fate? How many didn't have the courage or chance to run? How far behind are they? Kane asked. Returning. I left at dawn yesterday. Stole Father's best horse. Margaret looked at the exhausted animal with guilt. Rode him too hard, but I had to get away. You did right, Amelia said firmly. No one should be forced into marriage. Kane was already moving, checking weapons, barring shutters. They'll track the horse. We need to be ready. I'm sorry, Margaret whispered. I didn't mean to bring trouble. I just heard in town about a rancher who helped a woman, who stood up to men trying to take her back. I hoped. Amelia knelt beside her. You hoped right. We won't let them take you. Kane looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. They both knew what this meant: more trouble, more danger. But Amelia nodded. How could they turn away someone facing what she'd faced? There's a line shack up in the hills. Kane said, Old trapper's cabin. We could... No, Amelia's voice was steel. No more running, no more hiding. We make our stand here. Pride flashed in his eyes. Then we'd better prepare. They worked through the night. Margaret, despite her exhaustion, helped where she could. She was tougher than she looked. This slip of a girl who'd ridden 2 days alone through dangerous country. Why, Mr. Blackwood? Amelia asked as they cleaned rifles. There must be other ways for your father to pay his debts. Margaret's face darkened. Blackwood collects people, especially young women, uses them up and discards them. Father knows this, he just doesn't care. The words hit Amelia like cold water. She thought of Hartwell, of his calculating eyes, of what her fate might have been. You're safe now, she promised. Whatever happens, you won't go to him. Dawn came gray and misty. Kane had positioned himself by the front window, rifle ready. Amelia watched the back. Margaret, armed with an old revolver Kane had taught her to use, covered the side approach. They came with the morning sun, 6 riders emerging from the mist like specters. The man in front was big, red-bearded, swaying slightly in his saddle. Patrick O'Brien, drunk this early but still dangerous. Beside him rode a man in black who could only be Josiah Blackwood, even from a distance. Something about him made Amelia's skin crawl. He sat his horse like a spider waiting in its web. Margaret, O'Brien bellowed. Get out here, girl. You've caused enough trouble. Kane stepped onto the porch, rifle casual but ready. Gentlemen, you're on private property. That girl is my daughter. O'Brien slurred, I've come to collect her. The young lady has asked for sanctuary. Kane replied, I'm inclined to give it. Blackwood finally spoke, his voice soft but somehow carrying clearly. Mr. Maddox, isn't it I've heard about you, how you harbor runaway women. It's an interesting hobby. I help people who need it, Kane said evenly. How noble. Blackwood's smile was thin as a blade. But the girl is legally promised to me. Her father signed the contract. Money has changed hands. Then you have business with her father, not her. She is my business. O'Brien lurched forward. Ungrateful brat cost me everything. Blackwood's willing to forgive the debt for her hand. She'll marry him and be grateful. I'd rather die. Margaret appeared in the doorway, the revolver steady in her small hands. I know what you do to women. Mr. Blackwood, what happened to your wives? Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. Careful, child. Accusations like that can be dangerous. The truth is dangerous. Amelia stepped out beside Margaret. And we know the truth about men who buy women like cattle. Another runaway, Blackwood observed. How interesting. Tell me. Miss Voss, yes, I know who you are, does Mr. Maddox collect broken birds? Is that his particular interest? The only broken things here, Kane said quietly, are men who think they can own other people. The tension stretched taut. 6 men against 3 defenders. But Kane had chosen his position well. They'd have to cross open ground to reach the house, and the windows provided good cover. Be sensible. Blackwood tried again. The girl comes with us, and we leave peacefully. Otherwise, he gestured at his men. All armed. All watching for his signal. Otherwise, you'll murder us for standing between you and your victim, Amelia asked. Is that the kind of man you are? Mr. Blackwood. I'm a man who gets what he's owed, Blackwood said coldly. You're owed nothing, Margaret's voice cracked. Nothing but contempt. O'Brien's face went purple. You little... He reached for his gun. The shot came from the side of the house. O'Brien's hat flew off, and he froze, hand halfway to his holster. Everyone turned to see Judge Carter and 2 deputies emerging from the barn, where they'd been waiting since before dawn. Kane had sent word to town the night before. Morning, gentlemen, Judge Carter said pleasantly. Having a disagreement? Judge. Blackwood's voice was smooth again. We're simply collecting what's ours. Last I checked, people can't be owned in Montana. The judge replied, Not since the war ended. You boys forget that. The girl is promised. The girl is of age and free to make her own choices. Judge Carter interrupted. And from what I can see, she's chosen not to go with you. That settles it in my book. You can't interfere with a legal contract. I can when that contract involves selling a human being. The judge's friendly demeanor vanished. Now, you boys have 2 choices. Ride away peaceful-like, or spend some time in my jail while we discuss the finer points of law regarding human trafficking. Blackwood's pale eyes moved between them all, calculating. Finally, he smiled a cold, empty thing. This isn't over. It is, Kane said. You come near Miss O'Brien again, and you'll answer to me. And unlike the judge, I'm not bound by the law to be civilized about it. For a moment, violence trembled in the air. Then Blackwood turned his horse. Come, O'Brien. Your daughter has made her choice. Let her live with the consequences. O'Brien looked at Margaret one last time. You're no daughter of mine. Good, she said quietly. I'd rather be an orphan than your property. They watched the men ride away. Only when they disappeared over the ridge did Margaret lower the revolver, her hands finally shaking. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. Judge Carter tipped his hat. Kane, here's a friend. When he says someone needs help, I listen. He smiled at Amelia. Besides, I've got daughters of my own. Can't abide men who'd sell their children. After the judge and his deputies left, promising to keep an eye on Blackwood, the 3 of them sat around the kitchen table. Margaret looked lost, younger than her 17 years. What will I do now? She asked. Where will I go? Amelia looked at Kane. He nodded, understanding without words. You'll stay here, Amelia said, until you figure out what you want. We've got room. I couldn't impose. It's not imposing, Kane said. It's choosing. You chose to run, to fight for your freedom. Now choose to accept help while you find your feet. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Why help me? Amelia reached across the table, taking the girl's hand. Because someone helped me when I needed it. Because women should stand together. Because it's right. That night, they made up a bed for Margaret in the main room. As Amelia tucked blankets around the exhausted girl, Margaret caught her hand. Is it real? She whispered. Safety choice, or am I dreaming? Amelia smoothed the red hair back from her face. It's real, I promise. Sleep now. Tomorrow we'll start teaching you about ranching. In their bedroom, theirs now. Truly theirs, Kane pulled Amelia close. You were fierce today, he murmured against her hair, like a mother wolf protecting her cubs. She needed help. How could I turn her away? You couldn't. It's who you are. He kissed her softly. My brave woman who takes in strays. Like you took me in. Best decision I ever made. His arms tightened around her. "I love you, Amelia. Should have said it sooner, but—" She silenced him with a kiss. "I love you too, for the choice you gave me, for the man you are, for this life we're building." Outside, the wind sang through the valley, but inside was warmth and safety and love. They'd faced down another storm and emerged stronger. And somewhere in the main room, a young woman slept peacefully for the first time in years, knowing she was protected, valued, free. It was enough. It was everything. The town of Promise Ridge had always been a place of whispers and watching eyes, but now those whispers followed Amelia and Kane wherever they went. It had been 2 weeks since Margaret O'Brien had come to stay, and the story had spread like wildfire through the valley, the rancher who harbored runaway women, the couple who defied powerful men. Some called them heroes, others used less flattering terms. Amelia felt the weight of those stares as she guided the wagon down Main Street, Margaret beside her learning to handle the reins. Kane rode alongside on Brandy, alert for trouble. Their monthly supply run had become more complicated now that they were the talk of the territory. "Don't let them bother you," Amelia told Margaret, who shrank from the curious looks. "Hold your head high. You've done nothing wrong." At Morrison's general store, Mrs. Morrison greeted them warmly. She was one of the supporters, having left her own harsh marriage years ago. "Morning, ladies, Kane." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You should know there's been talk. Blackwood's been spreading poison about you three." "What kind of poison?" Kane asked. "Says you're running some kind of improper establishment." Mrs. Morrison's face flushed. "That you're corrupting young women, turning them against their rightful guardians." Margaret made a sound of disgust. "Rightful guardians who sell their daughters? We know the truth, dear," Mrs. Morrison assured her. "But others, well, some folks prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths." They loaded their supplies quickly, aware of the growing crowd outside. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Watson approached. He was a fair man, but he looked troubled. "Kane, Miss Voss might have a word." "Sheriff," Kane acknowledged, hand resting casual near his sidearm. "I've been getting complaints. Prominent citizens saying you're disturbing the peace, harboring runaways, interfering with family matters." He held up a hand as Amelia started to protest. "I know what's really happening, but Blackwood's got influence, and O'Brien's been making noise about kidnapping charges." "Kidnapping?" Margaret burst out. "I ran to them." "I know that, miss, but the law can be twisted when money's involved." Watson looked genuinely apologetic. "I'm not saying stop what you're doing. Lord knows someone needs to help these girls. Just be careful. Watch your backs." As they headed home, Amelia noticed more riders than usual on the road. Kane saw them too, his posture tightening, but no one approached, and they made it back to the ranch without incident. That evening, as they sat down to supper, Margaret surprised them both. "I want to learn to shoot properly, not just point and pray, but really shoot." Kane and Amelia exchanged glances. "That's not a bad idea," Kane said slowly. "But why the sudden interest?" "Because they're not done with us." Margaret's green eyes were fierce. "Men like Blackwood don't just give up. And next time, I want to be ready." So Kane began teaching both women marksmanship in earnest. Amelia had learned the basics, but Margaret threw herself into it with determination born of fear, transformed into anger. Day after day, the crack of rifle fire echoed across the valley. It was during one of these lessons that they saw the smoke. Black and ugly, it rose from the direction of town. Kane saddled Brandy quickly while Amelia prepared the wagon. They couldn't all leave the ranch unguarded, so Margaret stayed behind, rifle in hand, Dusty by her side. In town, they found chaos. The small church at the edge of Promise Ridge was ablaze, townspeople forming bucket brigades in a futile attempt to save it. But it wasn't the fire that made Amelia's blood run cold. It was the message painted on the ground in front of the burning building. Those who harbor harlots burn with them. "Dear God," someone whispered. Who would do such a thing? But Amelia knew. They all knew. This was Blackwood's response to their defiance, his warning of worse to come. Pastor William stood watching his church burn, tears streaming down his weathered face. He'd been one of their defenders, preaching about compassion and the protection of the innocent. Now he was paying the price. "I'm so sorry," Amelia said, gripping his arm. "Don't be," he said firmly. "I'd rather see my church burn than stand silent while evil men prey on the defenseless. Buildings can be rebuilt. Souls, once sold, are harder to recover." Cain was already organizing the men, containing the fire before it could spread. But the damage was done not just to the building, but to the town's sense of safety. Blackwood had shown he was willing to escalate. That night, back at the ranch, they held a war council. Margaret was pale but determined. "I should leave. This is my fault." "No." Amelia and Cain spoke in unison. "This is Blackwood's fault," Amelia continued. "His and every man who thinks he can own another person. You leaving won't stop him. It'll just teach him that terror works." "Then what do we do?" Margaret asked. Cain leaned back in his chair, thinking. "We don't wait for the next attack. We take the fight to him." "How?" "Blackwood's not the only one with influence. Judge Carter's been building a case, talking to the families of his former wives. Sheriff Watson may have his hands tied officially, but he's got friends too." Cain's smile was grim. "And there are others like you. Margaret? Other girls he's trying to acquire? What if they had somewhere to run to?" Understanding dawned in Amelia's eyes. "You want to make it official, not just helping whoever finds us, but actively offering sanctuary. A station on an underground railroad of sorts." Cain agreed. "For women fleeing forced marriages, abuse, slavery by another name." That's dangerous," Margaret breathed. "They'll come for us in force." "Let them come," Amelia said. "We'll be ready." Over the next days, word spread quietly through certain channels. Mrs. Morrison passed messages to women she knew needed help. Pastor Williams, preaching from the steps of his ruined church, spoke of sanctuary and courage. Judge Carter made sure legal precedents were established. The first new arrival came within a week. A 15-year-old named Catherine, whose uncle was trying to sell her to pay gambling debts. Then came two sisters from a mining camp, fleeing a father who used them as collateral in card games. Each brought their own story of desperation and hope. The ranch began to transform. Cain built additional shelter, nothing fancy, but warm and secure. Amelia organized the household, teaching the girls practical skills they'd need to make their own way. Margaret, no longer the newest arrival, became a fierce protector of the others. And through it all, Amelia and Cain grew closer. At night, after the girls were settled, they'd sit on the porch and plan. Their relationship had been forged in crisis, but it was deepening into something unshakable. "No regrets?" Cain asked one evening as they watched the stars. "None," Amelia said firmly. "This is what we're meant to do, what we're meant to be." Even with the danger, the threats, she laced her fingers through his. "Especially with those. Every girl we help is proof that there's another way, that women don't have to accept being property." "The town's divided," he warned. "Some support us, but others, they see us as troublemakers, disturbing the natural order." "Good," Amelia said fiercely. "The natural order needs disturbing." Cain pulled her close, kissing her temple. "My warrior woman, when I pulled you from that storm, I had no idea what I was unleashing on the world." "Are you sorry?" "Never. You've given my life purpose I didn't know I was missing." He was quiet for a moment. "But I worry. Blackwood won't let this stand. Neither will the others like him. Then we'll face them, together, all of us." Inside the house, they could hear quiet voices, the girls talking, sharing their stories, finding strength in each other. What had begun as one act of kindness had become something larger, something that threatened the very foundations of how men like Blackwood operated. "You know what this place needs," Amelia said suddenly. "What's that?" "A name, something that tells people what we're about." Kane considered. "What about Haven Ranch?" "Haven," Amelia repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, that's perfect." So Haven Ranch was born, though the name would never appear on any official map. To some, it was a beacon of hope. To others, a threat to everything they held dear. And in the darkness beyond the mountains, powerful men plotted its destruction, not understanding that some ideas, once planted, grow too deep to be torn out by force. The storm was coming, but this time, Amelia and Kane wouldn't face it alone. They had built something worth defending, and every woman who passed through their door became part of that defense. Haven Ranch stood ready, a testament to the radical notion that every person deserved the right to choose their own path. The real fight was just beginning. The storm came as darkness fell, just as they'd known it would. But this time, the thunder wasn't from the sky. It was from horses' hooves, dozens of them, surrounding Haven Ranch in a tightening circle. Amelia stood at the window, watching the torches appear like fireflies in the night. Beside her, Kane checked his rifle one more time. Behind them, Margaret marshaled the other girls, 7 of them now, into defensive positions they'd practiced. "Remember," Kane said quietly, "we hold them at the fence line. Don't let them reach the house." Through the darkness, a voice called out Josiah Blackwood, his tone conversational as if discussing the weather. "Mr. Maddox, Miss Voss, I've brought some friends who'd like to discuss your enterprise." Amelia counted the shadows. 20 men, maybe more. They'd brought a small army. "Nothing to discuss, Blackwood." Kane called back. "You're trespassing." "Am I? I have warrants here for harboring runaways, corrupting minors, running a house of ill repute." Blackwood's laugh was cold. "Amazing what money can buy, isn't it?" "Those warrants aren't worth the paper they're printed on." Judge Carter's voice rang out from behind the barn. He stepped into view with Sheriff Watson and a dozen deputized townsmen. "Especially since I've got federal marshals on the way to investigate your involvement in human trafficking." The silence stretched taut. Amelia felt Kane's hand find hers in the darkness. "You're bluffing," Blackwood finally said. "Try me." Carter's voice was steel. "Every girl in that house has testified. We've got documents, witnesses, enough to see you hang." "Then I've got nothing to lose, do I?" Blackwood's civility cracked, revealing the monster beneath. "Burn it down. Boys, no witnesses, no testimony." Everything happened at once. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Windows shattered. Margaret and the girls returned fire with surprising accuracy, weeks of practice paying off. Amelia found herself shooting through the broken window, picking her targets, no longer the frightened girl who'd fled into a storm. Kane was everywhere, shooting, shouting orders, protecting. When a group of riders broke through toward the house, he met them head-on, Brandy responding to his commands like an extension of his body. The battle raged. Smoke filled the air from gunfire and the torches some of Blackwood's men had thrown. But Haven Ranch held. The girls fought like cornered wolves, defending the only real home some had ever known. Then Amelia saw him, Blackwood himself, circling around toward the back where the youngest girls were stationed. Without thinking, she ran. She burst out the back door as Blackwood dismounted, approaching 15-year-old Catherine with a smile that made Amelia's blood freeze. "Stop right there," Amelia commanded, rifle raised. Blackwood turned, unafraid. The runaway playing soldier. How amusing. Not playing. Her hands were steady. Not running. Not anymore. "You won't shoot me. You're not a killer." "No," Amelia agreed. "I'm a protector, and I'll do whatever necessary to protect them from you." He lunged forward, perhaps thinking her conviction was merely words. The rifle cracked. Blackwood stumbled, clutching his shoulder, genuine shock on his face. "The next one goes in your heart," Amelia said calmly. "Your choice." Around them, the battle was turning. Blackwood's mercenaries, faced with determined resistance and the arrival of legitimate law, began to fall back. Without their leader's commands, their courage faltered. "It's over, Blackwood," Sheriff Watson said, appearing with shackles. "You're under arrest," as they led him away. Blackwood stared at Amelia with pure hatred. "You think you've won? There are others like me. They'll never stop coming." "Then we'll never stop fighting," she replied. Dawn revealed the damaged bullet holes, scorch marks, broken fences, but Haven Ranch stood. More importantly, everyone was alive, bruised, exhausted, but triumphant. Kane found Amelia sitting on the porch steps, finally allowing reaction to set in. He sat beside her, pulling her close. "You faced him down," he said, "protected Catherine." "We all protected each other." She leaned into his warmth. "That's what family does." "Family," he repeated, smiling. "Is that what we are? What else would you call it? A man, a woman, 7 girls who need a home." She looked up at him. "Unless you had other ideas." "Well, I was thinking—" He shifted, suddenly nervous. "Maybe we should make at least part of it official. You and me." Amelia's heart skipped. "Kane Maddox. Is that a proposal?" "It's whatever you want it to be. Marriage, partnership, standing together against the world." She kissed him, long and sweet, tasting promise and gunpowder and forever. "Yes," she said against his lips, "to all of it." Cheers erupted from the windows where the girls had been shamelessly eavesdropping. Margaret's red head appeared first. "About time we were starting to think we'd have to lock you two in the barn." "Respectful young ladies don't spy," Amelia called, but she was laughing. "Who said we were ladies?" Catherine shot back. "We're Haven Ranch girls. We're tougher than that." Judge Carter performed the ceremony a week later in what remained of the church. The whole town turned out, those who supported them standing proud, those who'd opposed them notably absent. The girls served as bridesmaids, each wearing whatever finery they'd managed to acquire. None matching, but all perfect. "Do you, Amelia Voss, take this man to be your husband to face whatever storms come, together?" "I do. No hesitation, no fear." She'd already chosen him 100 times over. "Do you, Kane Maddox, take this woman to be your wife to stand between her and harm, to give her freedom to be herself?" "Always have, always will." When they kissed, it wasn't the desperate kiss of a storm or the gentle kiss of new love. It was the kiss of partners who'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger. The kiss of equals who'd found in each other not a cage, but wings. That night, a different kind of storm rolled through, all lightning and thunder, but bringing cleansing rain. Amelia and Kane sat on their porch, watching it wash the world clean. Inside, the girls were safe, planning their futures. Some would stay, help run the expanding sanctuary. Others would move on, carrying the strength they'd found to new lives. "No regrets?" Kane asked, their familiar refrain. "One," Amelia admitted. When he looked concerned, she smiled. "I regret it took a storm to bring me to you. Think of all the time we had wasted." "Not wasted. We were becoming who we needed to be." He kissed her temple. "That frightened girl in the cave. She wasn't ready for this. Neither was the bitter soldier building fences alone. We had to break first, to rebuild stronger. Together. Together." Lightning flashed, illuminating the valley that had become their kingdom, not one of ownership, but of sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Word of Haven Ranch would spread. More girls would come seeking shelter. More men like Blackwood would try to stop them. But tonight, Amelia Voss Maddox sat with her husband, her chosen family safe inside, and knew that some storms were worth weathering, Some fights were worth fighting. And some kisses, whether in lightning-split darkness or sunset gold, were worth everything they cost and more. In the morning, they would rise and continue building their radical experiment in freedom. But for now, they held each other and watched the storm pass. Two people who'd learned that the strongest sanctuary isn't made of walls, but of the choice to stand together. The lightning flashed one more time, and in its brief illumination, anyone watching would have seen what love looked like, not possession or control, but two people choosing each other over and over, no matter what storms might come. Haven Ranch stood ready for tomorrow, and Amelia smiled, knowing she would never again fear the thunder. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying these tales. Please share in the comments below where you're listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts about these Wild West stories. If you enjoyed this journey with Amelia and Cain, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of courage, love, and freedom in the American frontier. Your support means the world and helps keep these tales alive for everyone who believes in the power of choice and second chances.